Hey, podcast family, and welcome to episode number 267 of the L3 Leadership Podcast, where we are obsessed with helping you grow to your maximum potential and to maximize the impact of your leadership. My name is Doug Smith, and I am your host. And today's episode is brought to you by my friends at Henny Jewelers. They are our jeweler of choice, and you can learn more about them at hennyjewelers.com. Well, in today's episode, you may have noticed that we haven't actually aired a new podcast episode in a while, and that's because I've been going through a very difficult season in my life, and I'm going to actually just share about what I'm learning walking through this season in my life. And even though it's been one of the hardest seasons of my life, in the midst of it, I have found that God is doing a significantly deep work in my heart and in my soul. And I can just tell you this, I am learning a ton about anxiety, panic, the brain, stress, burnout, rest, recovery, and spiritual warfare. And I'm going to be sharing what I'm learning with you in today's episode. And so wherever you find yourself as you listen to this on your leadership journey or in your life journey, I believe this will be a lesson that will help you significantly. But before we dive into the lesson, just a few announcements. Hey, 2020 is coming to a close, and I know many of you are very grateful for that. But as you are starting to think about 2021, you're going to start thinking about your goals, how you can grow, how you can make an impact. And I really want to challenge you. One of the greatest ways that you can make an impact is by leading and developing other leaders. And we actually have a way for you to do that here at L3 Leadership. One way that you can grow significantly is to become an L3 Mastermind Group facilitator. We have mastermind groups that meet every 2 weeks for an entire year, and our facilitators pour into that group and they lead and help develop that group. Now, I've been a part of a mastermind group and leading mastermind groups for 6 years now, and it has been the single greatest source of growth in my life. And so if you've never been in a mastermind group, or if you've thought about leading a mastermind group but don't know how to, here's the great news. We take care of everything for you. We will train you. We will give you everything you need. And in fact, we'll even compensate you for being an L3 Mastermind facilitator. So if you'd be interested in leading leaders and making a difference in 2021, you can just simply go to l3leadership.org/lead, and you can sign up, and we will be in contact with you on taking a next step with us. So don't let 2021 go by without pouring into leaders. And one of the greatest ways you can do that is to lead a mastermind group. I also want to thank our sponsors, Bare Tongue Advisors. The financial advisors at Bare Tongue Advisors help educate and empower clients to make informed financial decisions. Find out how Bare Tongue Advisors can help you develop a customized financial plan for your financial future. Please visit their website at baretongueadvisors.com. That's BERATUNG advisors.com. Securities and investment products and services offered through Waddell & Reed, Inc., member FINRA and SIPC. Bare Tongue Advisors, Waddell & Reed, and L3 Leadership are separate entities. And with all that being said, let's dive right into the lesson. Enjoy. Hey everyone, today I'd like to talk to you on the subject dealing with burnout, anxiety, grief, and stress as a leader. And you could take out leader in that sentence and just put human being, because the reality is we all deal with these things. And in 2020, I'm willing to bet there's not a person on the planet that didn't experience at least one, if not all of those things. And so, wherever you are in your journey, I pray that this will be a message that encourages you, gives you hope, and also gives you practical tools to help navigate through some of these things. I'm just simply going to be sharing my journey in dealing with these things and what I'm learning, and I hope that it will add value to you. I would encourage you to also go back and listen to episode number 264. I recorded a lesson on how to deal with anxiety as a leader, and this is really part 2 of that lesson. So I'd really encourage you to listen to both. But let me just catch you up on my journey with these things. In August of 2020, I started experiencing panic and anxiety attacks, and that kind of led into this very difficult season I've been in for about 4 months. And I recorded the anxiety lesson in September, and then in October, I actually got worse. And I'm sharing this, and I share my journey because I think it's important for people and leaders to realize that if you're going through something like this, you're not the only one going through it. There was multiple people, that come to mind. Brian Johnson, I mentioned in the podcast, he's pastor of Bethel Church. He went through the exact same experience as I was listening to messages around anxiety and people's journey. Louis Giglio went through a season where he couldn't get off the couch for 3 months. And I think it's important that we share the trials that we go through, especially when God brings us out on the other side, because it makes people realize that they're not alone and they're not the only ones going through this. And that was a source of great hope for me when I was going through things. And so I mentioned in October, things got worse, and there was actually a week where I could not function. in October. And it was pretty scary. And, in the past couple months, I've had to cut a lot of things out. And one of those things included podcasting for a while. I had to say no to a lot of interviews that I had scheduled that I was looking forward to. But the most important thing is I had to learn that this is a season where I have to focus on me, getting back to my mental health, my physical health, my emotional health, and my spiritual health. That is absolutely vital, because if those things aren't in order, I can't do anything else. But I want you to know how serious this was. My question for an entire month to people and friends that I was with was, am I going to be okay? Am I going to make it? Because the reality was I wasn't sure. It was a scary place to be. And I can tell you that, since October, we're now in December. I've had about eight really good weeks heading in the right direction. And I'll be sharing a little bit about, how I'm doing those things and what I've been doing over those 8 weeks to help me in this episode. But I just want to let you know that's where I've been. And if you're in a scary place, it's okay. You're not alone, and there is hope for you, and there is help for you. And so let me just share a little bit about what I've learned in this journey of the past 4 months. The first thing I just want to talk to you about is asking the question, why? Why? When I started experiencing these things, naturally, as a problem solver and as a leader, I want to fix it, and I want to fix it as soon as possible. And so how do you fix an issue? You try to figure out the root of the issue. And as I looked at the root of the issues in my life, several things came up and that I'll share about. One is burnout. There's a book that I read that was fantastic called Leading on Empty by Wayne Cadero, I think is how you say his last name. Leading on Empty. I can't recommend it enough. And when I read it, I realized very, very quickly that I had burned out. And that if I am going to get back into where I was or get into an even better place, that I really need to focus on getting myself healthy and resting and recovering. And I'll share a little bit about what those things are. But when it comes to burnout, here's some things that people said to me that were extremely helpful. One was reading that book, Leading on Empty. Two is I had a mentor meet in my life, and he basically looked at me and he said, Doug, your body is speaking to you. And you don't realize this or not. I know it's painful and I know it's difficult to go through what you're going through, but what your body is saying to you is actually saving your life. It's saving your life. Your body's speaking to you and saying what you're doing now is not sustainable. And that's a reality that I had to come to grips with in my life. I was burning out. I had burned out. And I was meeting with my therapist, and yes, I've been going to therapy, and it's been absolutely wonderful. And I just said, hey, talk to me about burnout. What have you learned about burnout? And he said, Doug, burnout in my experience when I work with people, it's not so much a capacity issue. Usually people have a ton of capacity. It's usually unrealistic expectations that you have for yourself internally. I'll say that again because that was huge. Burnout isn't always necessarily a capacity issue. It can also be unrealistic expectations you have for yourself internally. And for me, that was absolutely a huge cause of why I believe I burned out. I put such heavy expectations on myself. It's ridiculous. And I've had to learn to let that go in the past couple months, and I'm still learning to let that go. But unrealistic expectations and pressure that you put on yourself can lead to burnout. And then lastly, when it comes to burnout, I didn't have rhythms of rest in my life. I just went all the time. Go, 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 go. So burnout was one of the big reasons why I believe I entered into the season 2 is unprocessed grief. Unprocessed grief. And I was meeting with a mentor, and he basically looked at me, and he had known my life. And, you may not have context for my whole life story, but he said to me, he said, Doug, you basically watched your mom die as a teenager over the course of 7 years. And you medicated that with drugs. And then you got saved, which was awesome. But then you started medicating your pain through performance. And so you've spent the last 17 years building walls around yourself of performance to avoid feeling pain and allowing yourself to grieve. And I realized for the first time in my life, I don't even know if I had really grieved my mom. I didn't know if I grieved my mother-in-law. I didn't know if I grieved my sister's death. And that really, really hit home for me. And Keith Anderson has this quote. He said this. He said, most people don't expect the amount of loss and grief that surfaces when you are finally quiet. And, this year, prior to all this happening, I had finally gotten to a quiet place in my soul, and I feel like it allowed me to come to this place where I can deal with grief. But there was a lot of grief that I never dealt with. And so unprocessed grief I had to deal with, and I believe it led to the season that I'm in. It was one of the reasons why. And I love what my therapist said to me about grief. He said, Doug, you can't say goodbye to something you've never said hello to. And, in my mind, I said goodbye to grief a bunch of times, but the reality is I never even said hello to grief. And so I had to learn how to grieve in this past 4 months, and I'll share about that in a second. And the last reason is I've reflected on the why of this season is I believe I'm in a spiritual battle. I believe in spiritual warfare. And the reality is, and clearly I'm speaking as a person of faith, the Bible is very clear that we have an enemy who desires to destroy our lives and make sure we never fulfill the plan of God in our lives. In the Bible, in Luke 22:31, Jesus said this to Peter. He said, Satan has asked to sift all of you as wheat. In 1 Peter 5:8, it says, be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour. In John 10:10, it says, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. And I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. It's very, very clear that the enemy wants to destroy our lives. And so we will have spiritual warfare in our lives. But the reality is in Christ, we always have victory. We always have victory. But when thinking about why, you have to realize that there's going to be spiritual battles in your life. And I love this. I was listening to a sermon by Keith Moore, and he said this, and it ministered to me so much. He said, the reason some battles seem so tough is because you can't see it in the spiritual, but the enemy is doing his best to squash an acorn before it becomes a mighty oak tree. I love that. He's doing his best to squash an acorn before it becomes a mighty oak tree. And the reality is, a lot of times when a spiritual battle comes in our lives, it means we're getting ready to go to another level, a deeper level with God, a deeper place in our calling. So just realize that in life, you're going to have spiritual battles and there's going to be spiritual warfare in your life. But know that in Christ, you always have the victory. And the last thing I would tell you when it comes to the why is I read this quote by J.I. Packer, and I love this. He said, if you ask, why is this happening? No light may come. But if you ask, how am I to glorify God now? There will always be an answer. And I love that. And the reality is, I've mentioned some things of why I think I'm in the season that I'm in the natural and even in the spiritual. But the reality is I may never know why I'm going through something. But I can always ask, how am I to glorify God? And do you know one way I can glorify God is by recording this podcast and sharing my story? Again, I can't tell you how encouraging it was that Louis Giglio, Brian Johnson, Wayne Cadero all shared their stories of how they went through very similar things. It made me realize that I'm not alone. I had a mentor tell me, Doug, I don't know a leader that I'm friends with who hasn't gone through what you're going through. And the reality is the Bible says we're all going through the same tests and trials, and we are not alone. And you are not the only one going through something. But always look for a way to glorify God in the midst of what's happening. Even if you don't know why, always look for ways, because there is always a way to glorify God in what you're going through. I want to spend the rest of this lesson just sharing with you some practical things that have helped me over the past 4 months, and I hope that they'll help you as well. And the first area that I would talk to you about is my walk with God. This has been my number one priority over the last 4 months, and this has been huge. I can't tell you how grateful I am for the deep work that God is doing in me in this season, in the midst of everything that I'm experiencing. I'm so grateful for God, and I don't know how people do life or go through trials without Him. I really don't. But I've spent more time in the Bible, more time in prayer, getting quiet and worship, etc., than I ever have before during the season, and it's been life transforming for me. And so, more than anything, I just want to encourage you: if you're a person of faith, go all in with God in these seasons. And sometimes it takes a difficult season to make us realize that God wasn't our first priority when He should be. And I know that was the case for me. And so God is back in His rightful place in my life, and I'm very grateful for that and the work that He's doing. So put God first, no matter what season you're going through. The second thing I'd encourage you to do is continue to get professional help. I've mentioned this before, but I've been going to therapy, and it's been one of the most beneficial things I've ever done. And just some things that have helped me in therapy that I thought I'd share with you is, one, I had to do a trauma assessment and make a journal of every traumatic experience that I've had in my life. And I was absolutely shocked at how many traumatic experiences I have had and how they were impacting my beliefs and how I lived my life. And it was some deep, deep work. I've continued to journal. You guys know how big I am on journaling, but I journal everything, and especially things I'm grateful for in seasons like this is huge. I also had to do an assessment and an evaluation of my beliefs. And one of the core beliefs that I have that causes me anxiety is that I'm not enough, right? And I constantly try to prove that I'm enough. And I did this assessment, and you basically just make two lists. And the first list is, what evidence do you have that you're not enough? And when I actually had to process that, I had like 0, right? And then it's like, well, what evidence do you have that you are enough? And get real specific. And then all of a sudden I made this huge list, and it's just funny, I had substantial evidence that I'm enough, and yet this core negative belief that can dominate my life is that I'm not enough. But when you actually sit and journal that, it is such deep work. And that was a huge revelation to me to do that. And now I have a tool that I can use anytime that I'm experiencing a core negative belief. Another thing that was helpful in therapy was having a safety plan. And again, I said that, I had a really difficult time in October. And so and I don't have it in front of me, but it's a list of what I do when I'm in trouble. So if I'm having a hard time with anxiety, well, hey, I think it's a 10-step list. And it starts off with, hey, I'm just going to spend time with God. I'm going to turn on worship music's number 2. 3 is I'm going to pray. 4 is I'll listen to a sermon. 5 is I'll talk to Laura. 6 is I'll phone a friend or a mentor. 7 is I'll call my therapist. And then 8, 9, and 10 are, if you're in serious trouble, you could call, in Allegheny County here in Pittsburgh, there's a Resolve hotline where you can call and talk to someone and you can go to the hospital, etc. And so just having a safety plan for if you get into difficult waters is absolutely huge. And I'd encourage you to make one if you don't. And then lastly, just sharing what you're learning in therapy and sharing what you're going through. Again, you'll be shocked at how many people are going through the same thing that you are and that you're not alone. And you'll really develop a community of people going through the same thing that you can go through this journey with them instead of going through it alone. And so continue to get professional help. Therapy is awesome. If you've never done it, sign up. It's awesome. The third thing that I would encourage you to do is invest in deep friendships. And when I was at the peak of going through a difficult time in October, I'd called my best friends and I just said, can we just go for walks and talk? And so I went on many, many walks, which was so refreshing. And 2 of my friends and both mentors as well, they both called me out and they said, Doug, you've been neglecting deep friendships in your life for a long time. You've been neglecting deep friendships in your life for a long time. And the reality is I've, quote unquote, thousands of friends out there, but I have very few deep friendships. And they said, you need to really invest in those, 3 to 5 deep friendships in your life. And you need to call those people every week and connect with them every week and just invest in deep friendships. And so that's a commitment I'm making from this day forward, is that I'm going to invest in those deep friendships for the rest of my life. And so if you've been neglecting deep friendships, stop. Don't wait till you're in a time of need to reach out and try to develop those. Develop deep friendships and give your lives to those 3 to 5 people. It'll change your life. The fourth thing I'm learning about and that I would encourage you to do is to develop rhythms of rest in your life. Rhythms of rest. For years, I prided myself on only getting 6 hours of sleep a night and waking up at 4 a.m. and being so productive. But I didn't realize how important rest was until I burned out and needed to rest and was basically forced to rest. And so for me, what rhythms of rest look like in my life, I'm going to let myself, at least in this season, sleep as long as I can. That's usually between 7 and 9 hours a night. It's been so refreshing to get 8 or 9 hours of sleep a night. And then each year, these are the rhythms I aspire to. I don't know if I'll hit them, but this is what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to do a 2-week vacation every year where I get away for 2 weeks and just totally unplug. I'm going to try to do 1 staycation once a year. And this was interesting. During the season, I actually took a week off of work and just stayed home and didn't work. And the girls were in daycare. And it was so refreshing. And I realized that so many times, even when I'm on vacation, I'm not fully resting because I want to go do something or see something, etc. And so I'm just going to stay home once a year and do nothing and just drink deeply from deep friendships and just be. We implemented this earlier this year, but we're going to have a weekly Sabbath, a day where we rest and don't do anything. I want to do quarterly family getaways on 3-day weekends with my family and quarterly overnights with my wife, Laura. And so those are the rhythms of rest that I want to implement in 2021 in my life. I would encourage you to make a list of your own rhythms of rest. The next area that I continue to learn about, and I would encourage you to, is grieving. And I talked about this a little bit earlier, but I realized that I thought I had grieved, but I really had a lot of unprocessed grief in my life. And so for me, something that I did that was very impactful in this area is I actually went to the grave sites of each of my lost loved ones, and I wrote letters to them by their graveside. And I can't get into it that much other than just saying that God used that time in a very significant way. And I feel like it allowed me to grieve the deaths of those I lost. And so I just want to encourage you to study the subject of grieving. If you have a lot of loss in your life, let yourself go there. Let yourself feel the pain. Let yourself feel the loss. Get into support groups to help you process grief and just get support around you. But that exercise of going to the grave sites and writing letters to my lost loved ones was really beneficial and something I'd encourage you to do. The next thing I'd like to talk to you about is pruning. And as I sat down with one of the mentors that I was meeting with throughout this period of my life, they basically encouraged me. They said, Doug, you need to spend time in John chapter 15. And it talks all about branches that need either pruned or cut. And they said, Doug, I think you've built a lot of branches in your life, and some of those branches need cut, and some of those branches need pruned. And he said, the hard part for you is all the branches you built around yourself to medicate yourself from experiencing pain are good and noble things. You don't have any unhealthy addictions or anything like that in your life. So it's going to be very difficult for you to discern what needs pruned and what needs cut. But spend time with God and he'll reveal that to you. And so that's something I am currently in the midst of doing. And I'm literally throwing everything on the table. So, God, is there anything in my life that needs pruned? Is there anything that needs cut? And please make that abundantly clear to me. And one of the most helpful pieces of advice that I got in this time was that I don't need to make a hasty decision in this. I don't need to make a hasty decision to prune this or cut that. I really need to spend time and just hear from God. I will share with you two things I have cut or did cut at some point throughout the season. And one was social media. I got off social media for an entire month. And let me just tell you, I did not miss it at all. And it was huge, and it was awesome to be off for a month. So that was something I pruned. And then, believe it or not, for those of you who know me, I pruned coffee. So that is crazy. As of the recording of this podcast, I'm probably 3 or 4 months into no coffee, and I've just been drinking green tea. I'm actually drinking some right now, and I never thought I'd prune or cut coffee in my life. Maybe it'll come back one day. I do miss it, but that was significant for me as well. So pruning, but maybe you need to take some time in your life and just process with God, hey, what in my life needs cut and what in my life needs pruned? The next thing that I'm learning a lot about is just learning and knowing that I'm enough. Learning and knowing that I'm enough. Again, my toxic thought always and my core beliefs is that I'm not enough. And so I constantly am trying to prove that I am enough. And that is not healthy at all. And just some things that have been encouraging to me in this season when it comes to knowing that I'm enough is, one, the very same mentor I've been talking about that I met with, he said, Doug, I've never seen someone in my entire life with more favor than you have with people. Everywhere you go, people love you. Everywhere you go. But you keep trying to earn what God has freely given to you. Stop trying to earn what God freely gave you. People don't love you because of what you do for them. People don't love you for anything you've done. They love you for who you are. And just freely accept that gift that God gave you. And that was huge for me. It was huge. It was like, people just love me for me. And that's why I'm enough. I'm not enough because I produced this or do that or met with this. Like, no, I am just enough. Something else, just a fun story, and this will hopefully be a title in a chapter in a book one day. But I was randomly talking to my dad, and I don't even know how this came up, to be honest with you, but I was telling him what I was going through, and I didn't mention anything about not being enough. But he said, Doug, people always come up to me and they say, Doug, or John, you must be really proud of your son with everything he's doing. And my dad he said, I always look back at them and just say, I'd be proud of him if he was cleaning toilets. And he looked at me, he said, Doug, I don't give a SHIT what your job title is. And man, that was so awesome. And my dad hasn't very often told me that he is proud of me in my lifetime, but that statement just helps so much, just saying that my dad loves me for me and he's proud of me no matter what I do. And again, I am enough, and so are you if you're listening to this. And my mentor went on to say, he said, all you need to do, Doug, is simply look at the gifts and the way that God created you and say, God, this is how you created me. I wonder how you're going to use my gifts. I wonder how you're going to use me in my lifetime based on who you made me to be, because I didn't create me. God created me, and God put everything in me that I need. And so what is he going to do with that? And so my question for you is what toxic lies and belief systems are you believing that are limiting you and holding you back? And you need to identify those and deal with them and share them with people and have people speak truth into your life. I'm so grateful for those men speaking truth into my life, and it certainly helped me on this path to knowing that I'm enough. And so whether you're like me and your lie is I'm not enough, or you don't know what it is, take some time, figure out what your toxic beliefs are, and then figure out ways to destroy them. So just a few more thoughts before we wrap up. The next thought would be this, that taking medication is okay. Taking medication is okay. And I know this can be controversial, especially in faith circles, but I would tell you this, that prior to this experience, I would have been opposed probably to taking medication. But I had reached such a low point that I was willing to do anything that it required to get help. And as I met with mentors, as I met with friends, first and foremost, I was shocked at how many people were going through the exact same battle or had gone through the exact same battle that I'm going through now. which was so encouraging and comforting. And then to learn that many of them had been on medication for a season or are still on medication to help them was very, very helpful. And so I started being open. And as I worked with a professional, I was encouraged to get on medication. And I did get on a low dosage medication. It's a medication that's not addictive, which was important to me. And again, I'm not a doctor, so I would encourage you to seek professional help. But I just want to encourage you and let you know that I'm on medication. And again, it's not what I want. It's not ideal, but it's what I need for now, and I'm hoping that it'll just be a season and I can wean my way off of it. That is my plan. But I just want to let you know it's okay to take medication if that's what you need to get by in this season, but do it through professional help, and don't take medicine if you haven't been recommended that from a professional. So that's all I'm going to say when it comes to taking medication. And the next thing would just be things that I'm implementing through this season that have helped me, that'll probably change my life forever. Some I had done, but I'm kind of shifting the way I did it, is one, I'm daily unplugging. I'm daily unplugging. And one of my favorite quotes when it comes to unplugging was from Rick Warren. And he said, as leaders, you need to divert daily. So every day you need to just unplug. And he said, if you work with your mind all day, you need to do something with your hands, like cook or garden. If you work with your hands all day, you need to do something with your mind, like read a book, etc. So divert daily. And then he said, withdraw weekly. And this is all about Sabbathing. So every week you need a day off where you do nothing and don't think about work. And then abandon annually. And so every year you get away on a vacation and just get away. And so I talked a little bit about rhythms of rest earlier, so I won't go into that. But daily unplugging for me, that just means when I get home from work, until my girls go to bed, I am with my girls, and then I'm with Laura, and then I'm basically hitting the hay. And so that's my daily unplugging. Exercising daily. Everywhere I went through this season, and every expertise, every professional that I sought out basically just said exercise daily. It's huge. Get a hobby. This is something that I've heard in theory but never actually practiced, and so I'm trying to find a hobby. I'm trying to learn how to fish. I'm trying to learn to just go for walks. I don't know what my hobby is going to be, but I am determined in 2021 to find a hobby that I love, and a hobby is something that I can't keep track of and can't get credit for. So we'll see what that is. I'll keep you posted. Eating healthy. This is something I've been focused on for the past 12 years, but I'm kind of going into a little bit of a deeper layer. I may actually get a functional medicine coach to help me to see if there's foods that I'm allergic to and just get coached in the area of eating specifically to my needs. So that's a goal for 2021. I will continue to go to therapy because that's been huge. And then I mentioned this already, but talking with friends weekly, actually just calling to check in. That's going to be something that I'm changing and implementing daily. And the last thought I want to leave you with, or the last challenge, is I want to challenge you to overcome your fear of death. I want to challenge you to overcome your fear of death. And, something that I share all the time is that one day you're going to die and that life is short. And I've had a lot of loss in my life, so I had to learn that lesson very, very early. But I think when I share about that lesson, it's always from the lens of, hey, life is short, so you go after it, go get stuff done, go crush it, do everything you can. And I don't think I spent enough time reflecting that one day I'm going to be out of here. And this season, that became very real, because if you've ever dealt with panic and anxiety, it can feel like you're going to die, and death can just seem like a breath away, and it's really, really, really scary. And one of the things that we did during this season was I went on a mastermind retreat. And one of the things we did was we went into the woods for 2 hours by ourselves in isolation and just spent time with God. But as part of that, one of the mastermind group members actually handed out an envelope that had 5 truths in it that we were supposed to reflect on in our time together. And I'm not going to teach on the 5 truths, but one of the truths, it was just a piece of paper, and it said, "You are going to die." And I really have spent a lot of time reflecting on that in this season. And the reality was, like, I had a fear of death. I have a fear of dying in the season. And so it really caused me to get closer with God. And I listened to a message by Keith Moore, who's one of my spiritual heroes. And I'll include a link to it in the show notes, but it was called Overcoming Your Fear of Death. And man, it was just really good spiritually. And I could do a whole lesson on this, but I really want to encourage you to deal with once and for all your fear with death. And if you're a believer, you shouldn't fear death at all. The reality is, in Christ, man, when we die, we're going to slip out of our bodies. We'll see our bodies there and say, well, that's over. And man, we'll be accompanied by an angel, and he'll say, do you want to take the scenic route to heaven? And we'll go and we'll stand before God, and man, we will be in paradise forever. And that's the reality that we have in Christ. But we need to reflect on that, especially in tough seasons, especially when we fear death. And the reality is, all fear is based in and rooted in the fear of death, right? Even if you're afraid of going on an airplane, you're afraid you're going to crash and die. You're not afraid of being on an airplane. You're afraid of crashing and dying. Whatever your fear is, the end result is you're afraid you're going to die. And so I just want to encourage you from a spiritual level. One, if you don't have a relationship with Christ and know God, make that your number one priority. And I would love to talk to you about that. Feel free to reach out to me at any point. But if you really know God and know your eternity secure in Him, spend some time making sure that you've overcome the fear of death. And because once you do, you are totally free. Totally free. Totally free. And it'll be one of the most life-giving things you ever do is to overcome your fear of death. And we should have no reason to fear because we have God. And so I hope some of these things help today. Again, I like to be transparent and vulnerable about what I'm going through because I know when people are vulnerable and transparent with me about things they're going through, it helps me so much. And so hopefully some of these things helped. And listen, I don't have all the answers. If there's things that have helped you and you're experiencing a similar season, please let me know. I would love to learn from you and grow with you as well. And I just want to list a few resources as we close today. If you're looking for some additional resources that have helped me, number one, I've already mentioned some of these, but a book by Wayne Cordeiro named Leading on Empty, a book by John Mark Comer called The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, a book by Robert Morris called Take a Day Off, a book by Dr. Daniel Amen, Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. Very, very good. And then Keith Moore. If you just Google Keith Moore Week of Increase, it's a 4-part series that really helped me immensely. So I hope this helped you. I hope that it made you know that if you're experiencing something similar, you are not alone. There are a ton of people going through what you're going through, and you don't have to go through life alone. If you haven't gone back and listened to episode 264, I encourage you to do that. I shared some other things that I'm learning in this season there as well. And hey, if you know someone going through a tough season, please share this with them. I hope it will add value to their life and help them. And thanks for allowing me to come into your life through this podcast. It means the world to me, and we will talk to you next time. So, hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to that lesson. And as I mentioned in the intro, I hope that this helped you no matter where you are in your leadership or life journey. And hey, as you listen to this, you may have thought about someone who could benefit from listening to it. Maybe they're going through a difficult season as well. Please pass this on to them. Share it with others. Not only does it help us grow our audience, but it also helps people. And so if someone comes to mind, just please send it their way. And I mentioned a lot of resources in the lesson. You can find links to all of those in the show notes at l3leadership.org/267. And as always, I like to end with a quote, and I will quote Gerald Brooks again today, and I think this is fitting for today's lesson. He said this, he said, "A long time ago, God chose you. Today, remember to choose Him." Hey, thank you so much for listening and being a part of L3 Leadership. My wife Laura and I appreciate you so much, and we will talk to you next episode.